The Phoenicians opened up to Solomon the trade routes of the world. In return, Solomon guaranteed them a regular supply of oil and wheat. This agricultural surplus gave him his purchasing power and was the real basis of his wealth. A sledge with stones bedded in its bottom is still used for threshing on remote Bedouin farms. The wheat is spread on the threshing floor, and the continual circulation of the sledge gradually separates the grain. It is a timeless method common throughout the Near East, and is probably not so different to methods in use at the time of Solomon. Tossing the wheat in the air separates the chaff, which is blown away in the wind. It is then winnowed before being ground in a stone quern. The grain is poured into the center of the quern and emerges as flour for the baker. Agricultural produce was brought in to be stored in great warehouses and granaries. For 1 month in the year, each of the 12 provinces had to feed the capital. These new cities were built under the supervision of Phoenician craftsmen. Theirs were the skills which crafted the masonry, walls, and staircases, cutting the stone into accurate geometric blocks. This doorway, with its decorated capitals, is typical of Solomon's style of architecture. Their greatest work, however, was the building of Solomon's New Jerusalem, where the workmen were personally supervised by the Phoenician king. The stone was quarried locally, and the city was transformed from a small fortress town into one of the wonders of the ancient world. Deep under the present city lie the remains of Solomon's buildings. Solomon's palace once stood here, and the walled-up arches of the Golden Gate are on the site of the entrance to the temple. The layout was similar to a much smaller temple found at Arad, near the Dead Sea. At one end was the Holy of Holies, and in the center of Jerusalem was the sacrificial altar. Quoted from the Bible, 3 times in a year did Solomon offer burnt offerings and peace offerings upon the altar which he built unto the Lord. Solomon's temple was furnished in gold, and gold leaf decorated the richly carved cedar paneling. The fame of his magnificence spread far beyond the frontiers of Solomon's own kingdom, and the great of the world came to see for themselves and wonder. Ezekiel refers to silver, iron, tin, and lead coming from Tarshish. These metals with gold could come from Spain. The ivory, apes, peacocks, and additional gold could have been shipped from North Africa. Such a voyage might well have taken 3 years. Solomon struck a deal with the Phoenician king Hiram. In view of the success of their joint operations in the Mediterranean, they agreed that together they would open up new trade routes to the south in the Red Sea. The Bible tells us that a joint fleet was built at Etzion-Geber. Was this the port from which the Phoenician gold ships sailed? A world-renowned metallurgist undertook archaeological excavations. Professor Rothenberg.
This would not be a possible site for a port. You wouldn't possibly be able to build a ship there. The winds are so strong, the south winds are devastating. It's the worst place in the world to look for a port. The only site I can see is a small island called Jazirat Pharaon, the Coral Island, south of Eilat, which has a natural port, a beautiful anchorage. Even in the biggest storm it will be quite in that small bay. It's the only natural port, and I'm sure this is the site.
Here, excavations unearthed warehouses and workshops. Were the remains of caulking pitch and tar, which were found beside the small fortified harbor used on Solomon's new fleet? The whole island was enclosed in a fortified wall, part of which still exists at the base of later fortifications. This new port would open up a whole new hemisphere. It would challenge the land routes across Arabia. Eventually, the Phoenicians would reach India and circumnavigate Africa. Could Solomon's mines have been in one of these new and distant lands?